Good morning. We've been looking at faith and looking at it in Hebrews 11 and its various manifestations. Talked about Moses, and in verse 24 of Hebrews 11 we read, "By faith Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward." So Moses, we mentioned, refused to take on the mantle of privilege that would have come as a result of being seen as a descendant, or at least within the legal parameters of Pharaoh, to become the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Instead, verse 25 says he chose to be mistreated with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin, because he considered, verse 26, the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. I want you to this morning think about the reproach of Christ. Paul talks about at the end of Galatians, in Galatians 6, that he bears in his body the marks of Jesus. They were the term in Greek there for the marks of Christ were the stigmata of Jesus. And that had taken on kind of a lore throughout church history about the 5 marks, one on each wrist, one on each ankle or foot, and then one on the side. But that lore that it took on misses the point of the early usage of the word stigmata, which was often used for religious tattooing. And Paul wasn't saying I got literally tatted up for Jesus, but his point was that I bear in my body the marks of Christ, in that I have endured persecutions. The tattooing that I've taken on, the religious tattooing I've taken on, has been being beaten, being maimed, being marked, being scourged, being whipped for Jesus. This text is pointing out that Moses considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth. It's not just that he chose to not be embraced by the world, but he chose to be persecuted by the world. He went from being this, could have been a child of promise in Pharaoh's home, to being a leader, but one who was wandering in a wilderness. There wasn't a middle ground here for him. He either was going to be embraced by the system of the world at that time, exalted by the system of the world at that time, or rejected by the system of the world at that time. Faith is willing to take on that kind of rejection. A kind of rejection that might mean wandering, a kind of rejection that might mean drifting, a kind of rejection where you're not just stepping back into neutral in regard to the world, but you're actually being opposed by the world. And he considered that greater than the wealth and treasures of Egypt. He'd rather, in that old saying, he'd rather be a pauper in the house of God than a prince in the world. So that takes faith. That takes believing that what God offers is better than what the world offers. I hope that's true of you today, and I hope that's what you believe.